All right. Welcome back to another episode of Baxter's Buzz. I am your host, Baxter E. Hall. Welcome to my brain. Welcome to my frequency. Enter at your own risk. Today, I have Dr. Mary Cooney. She is an intergenerational inclusion consultant and catalyst. Dr. Mary, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to Baxter's Buzz.
Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I tell you what, you connect with people through like LinkedIn and that, and we don't always have the pleasure of actually getting to know folks. And so I'm just thrilled that we've been able to get to know one another. And I love the work that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to, hearing more about it and sharing that with my audience.
Cool. I love talking about generational inclusion. So I'm glad that you're interested, and I'm glad that I get a chance to talk about my passion. So let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So your title as intergenerational inclusion consultant, tell me what that means.
Well, it means in the workplace, we do have up to 5 different generations right now at work. And so that's obviously quite a large age range, the largest that we've had in many, many years, if ever. And as a result of that, we have a lot of different perspectives on life and practices, and we have different ways of communicating with each other. And unless we have a good grasp on why people have these differences, it can cause a lot of friction. This not knowing, why are you doing that, and kind of get for some paranoia. And what we see, the stereotypes, the name calling, the millennials, they just, are entitled, or these boomers, they're just stuck in everything. And not necessarily so true. So my thing with the intergenerational work is to say, we really are in this together, and we're not going to succeed unless we can, build this feeling of team, like intervarsity. Everybody, no matter where you are, we're in it together. And when, you talk about diversity, equality, and inclusion work, the real goal is the inclusion. We can have all the differences. We can make sure that people are being treated equally. But until people feel like, no, they're included, they're welcomed, they're respected and seen for who they are, we really haven't accomplished these goals. So that's why I kind of like to say, no, I'm here to help make the inclusion happen. And the catalyst is sometimes you just need somebody to help, get some sparks going.
Yes.
And that's what I do.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, the catalyst piece is, it's the part, I have a lot of conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talk about it at work, right? We were talking before we went on air about we had a session, our internal committee, we invited, we had a good turnout. We did some role playing. We talked about some microaggressions, right? We also do some consulting for clients as far as like external work, right? So we're working on it, but there's always work to be done. The intentionality behind it, and whenever I think about teams, I think about rowing. Not that I have done it much, but I just think about everybody sort of rowing in the same direction. And it's not about, we have to get on one accord. We got to figure out how to make this thing move and progress, if that's what we're trying to do. And it may take me learning about your tendencies, your your why, right? Your background, all these things that may go into why you go about things the way you do. And if you don't have that empathy, that true curiosity, you end up just spinning in a circle and not really making any real progress. So how did you get to this point, and when did this sort of light bulb go off to where you say, I want to spend more time sort of helping other people identify this and help these intergenerational, workplaces, kind of move as one unit?
Well, it started back around 2007, 2008, I think. My previous career was as a university professor. And it was right about then when I experienced a sea change in the temperament of my students. And I didn't expect it. I really didn't know what was coming. But all of a sudden, these students appeared in my class, and they were not going to let me even start teaching until they understood why they had to take this class, why it mattered, and how they were going to use it once they graduated. And I was totally taken aback. My first response was to say, you can't talk to me like this. Yeah. I'm the teacher. Right. I'm the authority, and you're the ones that are here to follow me. I knew I couldn't say that. It wouldn't fly. But what bothered me even more was that I couldn't readily answer that question. Wow. Deep down, I knew why it mattered, but I'd never been forced to articulate it before. So in the process of me going back and kind of doing this little inventory about, well, why does it matter? I realized I had material in my syllabus that just was not relevant anymore. I'd more or less been teaching the way I'd been taught, and even using a lot of those materials. And I also dawned on me, I needed to update. There was things that needed to be covered and explored, in the new millennium. And just by doing that in itself, helping me clean house, suddenly kind of woke me up and took me from doing things, same old. And the other thing I realized, because I was the mother of a millennial, that as, younger students, these folks were very interactive in their learning. They did not just sit in their little desks and have the teacher tell them to do things. They worked as teams. They were exploring problems. They were experimenting. They were, coming up with their research outcomes and whatnot. So I had to change my methodology. And in answer to the question, well, how are we going to use this once we graduate? I set up simulations of how a client might hire them and allowed them to work as a team. And my job as leader was to give them kind of a baseline of information, make sure they had a real clear deadline, when this was due, make sure that they knew how to access resources. And I was there to offer support throughout, but otherwise I had to give them as much autonomy as possible and flexibility. And the outcomes just blew me away. These sophomores in college were honestly doing graduate level research. Why? Because they could access it, and they were driven, they had a fire, they wanted to find it. And because they're so tech savvy, the way they could present, I never could have imagined ways of doing that. And so that's when I just had this big, like a conversion experience. So I went from, who are these people? To, who are these people? Yeah. So a few years later, when it was time for me, I no longer needed to be teaching full time, and I could make a transition. I still teach full time. I was hearing all this trash talk about millennials going to work, how they
Yeah.
weren't engaged, how they were lazy, how they thought they were supposed to get everything handed to me. And I just thought, no. This is really not who they are. And because I'm a boomer, I also understood why they are such a shock to boomer bosses. So I kind of can cross that divide. I have empathy,
Right.
with boomers, but I can also help them understand that this is not such a big sea change. We do share the same values. We have different ways of going about them.
Yeah.
And that all that really needs to happen in the workplace is that we rearrange the furniture. It's not totally turning anything upside down. We just got to rearrange the furniture because we do want that goal of business success. And we just kind of got to set aside a few of those, but this is how we've always done it. And so that's how I got to be where I am. The thing that has changed since I got started, and I've been doing this for 5 years, is that now we have to give some equal time and attention to the fact that, yes, lots of boomers are retiring, and we do need to make sure that there's the knowledge share and the leadership development on the part of younger generations. But also a lot of these older workers want to keep working. So how are we creating opportunities for the older workers to stay in the workplace and create opportunities for them to do things like step down retirement, just simple part-time, more mentoring opportunities, and upskilling, things that will make it possible for this intergenerational connection to keep being a positive.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I think that you say it so matter-of-factly, and it makes complete sense. We also know that there's a lot of resistance to that. And I'm sure all the professors weren't going, oh yeah, let's relearn everything that I've been doing for the past X amount of years, right? I mean, why was it important for you to accommodate, those requests and like those demands essentially for that generation, for the millennials, when you start to notice the shift?
Well, I think, first of all, I am a creative person. I come from a creative background, and I like to connect. When creativity works, it means we're making connections. And I thought, I think I became curious. I just thought, what will it take? Clearly, this isn't working. So what will?
Yeah.
And what's the next new thing? The other thing is that I was teaching as a lecturer, and that's something I chose to do because I can focus more on pedagogy, on the teaching, versus some of the politics one has to do working through the, tenured system. And I knew, as almost like a business type proposition, that if these students really didn't like and resisted what was happening in my course, which, by the way, was a requirement for graduation, they could just quit. And if you don't know, for a lot of millennials, it's not as urgent for them to have degrees as it was for us. Yeah. So they didn't necessarily have any problem just walking away from it. Yeah. Well, if I didn't have students in my class, I didn't have a job. Oh, what does that sound like?
Yeah.
I had a business interest
Sure.
in keeping them engaged, in
sure.
keeping them wanting to come back.
No, so that's real. That's real.
On me to be somebody that these people wanted to engage with. And as a result of me kind of tuning up, or retooling my process, these students then began to trust me. They saw, oh, she does want to meet us where we are. Oh, she's trying. Well, then they started trusting me, and it became easier and easier for me to lead, because I am not saying that they came knowing all there was to know. Now, they might want you to think that. And sometimes that kind of a bit of grandiosity is a bit of a cover up for, insecurities.
Sure.
A good teacher, a good parent knows that. So I wasn't going to get wound up in any kind of power struggle, but just to say, okay, and what if, and they would start to let me, take them to places that earlier they had resisted.
Let me ask you about, I got so many questions, and we don't have enough time for this particular conversation to go back into, but what I am fascinated about is so there's a group of folks that think that the younger people, the 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds in the workforce now are still millennials, right? Everyone underneath is a millennial, right? They don't realize there's a new generation that's in the workforce, right? But as a boomer, and a lot of the boomers that are in the workforce still, they're in leadership positions, right?
Yeah.
What did you notice was sort of some of the biggest impediments for the boomers sort of connecting with the millennial generation, and even, is it Gen Z, right? I mean, that's, can you speak about, from a high level, like what are some of the differences in connecting with millennials and then Gen Z, whether you're a boomer or whomever, like what, because these are the new folks. These are the people that are the future leaders of your organization. How do you connect with them, and how may it be different from what you've done in the past generations?
Well, I think the number one challenge is that we boomers grew up, and this is the same for traditionalists, who came before the boomers, in top-down management styles. You work your way up through the ranks, and the higher you get, the more you get to make the decisions, give the directions, and everybody below you follows. And the more compliant one is, the more they build, merit. And then the more they are able to, build their way up the ranks. And much of this comes from the fact that, especially in the traditionalist generation, almost all the men, traditionalist men, served in the military, Second World War. And that provided a whole lot of stability and security coming out of the Great Depression. And because we won the war, that military system of leadership certainly looked to be a pretty good one. I knew exactly where I belonged. I knew exactly who to listen to. I didn't have to spend a lot of time, reinventing wheels.
Yeah.
So why not? And us boomers, for as much as we got the benefits of, a big economic surge after the war, we did take to heart those lessons from our traditionalist parents, that yes, the world is our oyster. We can get anything, but we did have this feeling of, you've got to work your way up. You don't just declare it. And we can prosper, but you pay your dues, kind of thing. On the other hand, millennials and Gen Z have a much more egalitarian view of life. And, we could get further into how, by the way, boomer parents raised millennial children to have this notion more of shared power. And and a little sense of, look, if you know how to do something, why on earth wouldn't you be promoted into it?
Yeah.
And a little shorter sense of time span that's needed to work my way up. Why? Because of technology and how fast the world is moving, how much faster I can learn things.
Yeah.
And oh, don't forget that we parents raise people to say to believe you can be whoever you want to be,
That's
and we
right.
were always giving them awards and promoting them, whether they paid their dues or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that come to that, but this notion of just age as the reason or previous rank as the reason, I can't go there yet. It doesn't ring as authentic.
Yeah.
And I think that's another disconnect between older and younger generations is the way that we communicate, how much faster communication, and the way that the pace that the world's changing at. Again, technology being at the root of that.
So they say that I'm on the cusp, right? So technically I'm a millennial, although I don't always identify with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Talk about what a millennial, a Gen Z person coming into the workforce or starting a new job, what are they looking for? How do you keep, we talk about employee engagement, right?
Yeah.
How do you keep these folks engaged, and what are they looking for? What do they want?
Okay. Well, and of course, please know that I paint with very broad brushes, right?
Sure.
There's lots of individual exceptions. So
Absolutely.
and I think sometimes people put down generational, studies or what have you, because they think we're trying to say one size fits all.
Right.
It does not.
Right.
And it's only one segment of what makes a whole.
Sure. It's very nuanced. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, Baxter, you would be referred to as a Zennial, somebody on the cusp between Gen X and Millennial. And like that's even a thing where you've got your feet in kind of these camps. And so, no, you would not totally identify as a millennial, and yet you're not totally feeling the Xer thing either. And the good thing about that is you're a bridge builder. You can actually kind of get what's going on in the different worlds. But
I like that. I'll take that.
Okay. But Z's know that they are just now coming to work. The oldest, maybe 23, 24. I've got to maybe recheck my charts here, but they're just now graduating from college.
Yeah.
And one thing that we do know that sets them apart from the millennials is they are not necessarily coming in with a big burst of confidence, self-confidence that the millennials did. And to understand that, again, it's this whole thing of getting to know the backstory. And this, by the way, is, kind of where I come in to help organizations. Just once you can understand the backstory, that can go a long way in helping you to start solving problems. But millennials were born in a time of economic boom. A lot of our tech innovations were happening then. It was a good time. And again, they were born to an optimistic generation of parents.
Yeah.
And it's all possible. And we devoted a lot of time, to kids more than ever before. And yes, 9/11 happened, but a lot of these boomers, millennials were older. In other words, they they'd had experience with good times before that big scare happened,
Yeah.
the big change. Whereas when the Gen Zs were born, and even a little before, 9/11 happens and it's in the ether. Even if they're not super conscious, consciously aware, the feeling in the world is this is not a safe place. What's going to happen next? I don't know. All the adults around me and the world at large are just kind of on pins and needles.
Yeah.
And that is not a safe way to get your first start.
Yeah.
On the heels of that, the Great Recession.
Right.
You experience parents, one, if not both, losing a job. And because so much of that was around the housing bubble, maybe we lost our home. So you might have housing insecurity. With that can come food insecurity. And there's nothing harder for a child than to witness their parents struggling, knowing that there's nothing I can do about it. Insecurity, again. I go to school and I am rehearsing for school shooters on a regular basis, even if one never comes. And the hardest part to me about that is knowing that if a shooter comes, I am not collateral damage. I could be the target. And that could make me feel very anxious. So, kind of long story short, and not to mention the whole thing with environment, is we've got a pretty anxious generation here.
Sure.
And we know that the majority of this generation is on some kind of anti-anxiety medication or mood stabilizer. And this is nothing to be joked about.
Yeah.
This is nothing to be like, what's wrong with you? And I think for us boomers, especially, who did not grow up in a therapeutic world, there's nothing about suck it up here. And so what this generation, I'm curious to see how much more job stability they want. In other words, not changing jobs as rapidly. Because of that, we do know they're going to save money. They're not going to be such big risk takers. And the best way to engage and keep them is to offer that support. Many will say when they do the studies, like, well, what do you want? They will put mental health and other kinds of health benefits right up there. Right up there. Make sure I know how to get it and that I can get it and that they are good. And then you want the teams and the leaders to be able to detect when something is getting overwhelming and to, again, offer that support. It's not a sink or swim world anymore. Super smart, super creative, but just a little bit more work to be able to say in that psychological safety. We care. This is a good place to be.
I was thinking about this recently. It just kind of hit me, and maybe subconsciously I was already kind of getting there. But I thought, man, these parents, I'm, parent of young children, right? There's a lot of ups and downs and stress and anxieties. I was thinking, our parents, our grandparents, they were dealing with so much. And a lot of it was probably anxiety, depression. And we had no clue that there wasn't even, they were coping in ways that probably weren't the healthiest, right? And just not knowing, not having those outlets and not the therapy, like you said, wasn't as
available,
accessible,
and acceptable. There's a taboo around getting that.
Absolutely. You wrote an article a few weeks ago. It was published on the 15th of July. It's called Beginning Your Generational Diversity and Inclusion Journey. This is where it could take you. And I want to end with one concept that you speak about here. So what you start with the year 2025, right? And you kind of talk about this ideal organization that just received the nation's most prestigious diversity award for generational inclusion and action, right? Now, the piece that I want to talk about is this, I'm trying to find the word, this mentoring, this generational mentoring. What's the term?
It's called co-mentoring or mutual mentoring.
Yes.
That happens between the generations. So
yes.
it's a two-way mentoring program.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. The idea is that you are up a member of an older generation, and when we refer to older generations now, it could be an Xer.
That's
or
right.
A boomer, even a traditionalist, and a millennial or a Gen Z. But so they're teamed up with each other. And the purpose is that, the younger gen is there to help their older gen buddy stay current with, the snap change of all things tech. I know I do have younger mentors, all kinds, and so this is happening, what do you mean? And not have to feel embarrassed or like a dummy. No, I you to lay this out for me. And beyond that, just talk about emerging trends. So what is happening now? Where are we going? A lot more about the environment. What do we need to be aware of, even here within our, within our company? What are you feeling? What are you seeing?
Yeah.
So they're there to keep me, up on all things that are 21st century. And my job as the boomer is to help my young gen buddy really navigate workplace writ large, especially this notion of career. What does it mean to sometimes work through the politics of the joint? How does a younger gen kind of talk boomer when needed? That this, way that we run the place isn't always as egalitarian as it needs to be. But here are some ways that we can maybe do some workarounds, or I know somebody that could be a good ally for you, or let's work on a way to progress through the company, and just kind of talk about those day-to-day, things that bug me, because one good thing about me as a boomer is I've probably been there. I probably had to get through it. And I'll tell you, this is a little bit of an aside, but this is where some of this mutual memory or mentoring writ large proved itself during the pandemic. Had it not been for millennials kind of starting this whole notion of remote work and figuring out, insisting on working from home and connecting, all the different ways we can communicate off-site. Can you imagine what making that flip into pandemic would have been like if we'd never practiced working away? And they were told a lot when they started to say, I need some time and space away from the office, but I can get the job done. And time after time, they were said, no, you can't, no, you can't. And they did it anyway. And so then, the Gen Xers, from the time that they came to work, were saying, we want some work-life balance. Work is not my life. I do not necessarily have to be the top of the food chain the way you boomers are. I'm not going to work 80 hours a week because it's not my meaning. My
Yeah.
family is my meaning.
Yeah.
And so when we get into pandemic, they're able to say, this is how you do work-life balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can the boomers do? And I'm not as positive that we did it as well as we can, but we can offer stability. We can simply say to younger gens, this is not going to last forever. We've been through hard times before. I'm not going to say anything quite like this, but we've seen this. We've seen this a few times. And I've got your back.
Yeah.
And come and talk to me. I can give you just some assurances that the sun will come up. And I'm here to help.
Yeah.
To the extent we can do that, I think we're playing our role. And so that's the kind of mentorship we do for each other.
That's awesome. I was reading this article and you were painting this lovely picture, and I think that there's not enough of it, although there's probably some of it less formal that's going on, but there needs to be some more formal mutual mentoring in order to have those proper those knowledge transfers before folks retire. And also I think it keeps your younger generations aware of history and makes them feel more invested in the organization that they're in, right? And it takes people such as yourself that really understand and really care. I'll end by kind of where we began when you talked about 2007-ish, and you, Professor, talking to this group of millennials, this young millennials, and my brain thought, man, what a wonderful opportunity that is for you, Dr. Mary, to learn, to relearn some stuff, right? You're an educator, but you also are creative. And so it's like, we have to be more fluid. I applaud you for your fluidity. I applaud you for your willingness to unlearn some things, because I think that could be really, really tough. And your willingness to be an advocate, not just for your generation, but this really started because of you trying to advocate and accommodate a generation that you were struggling with, and there was some friction. So I applaud you for that. We talked about some opportunities that are presenting themselves for you as far as consultant opportunities. I can't think of a better person to come in and truly take that holistic approach as it relates to generational inclusion. So thank you so much for your time today. This has been really good.
Okay, thank you, Baxter. I've totally enjoyed it. And I'm glad to hear that maybe part of my story was useful. So
no, thank you for sharing. And yeah, I won't. Yeah, I feel like we could go another hour easily because there's so many things that I've learned today, and I have more questions now. But okay. I think we'll talk offline, and maybe we'll bring you back. But I just want to say thanks again for everyone that's watching this, listening to this. Thank you for the support. Please look up Mary Cooney on LinkedIn and connect with her. Learn more about what she has going on. A pleasure. And until next time, peace.